Welcome to the Playful Lens. We are beyond excited to bring you this episode. We speak with Dr. Jacqueline Fallon, who is involved in the redevelopment of our new primary curriculum framework. And in this episode, she brings clarity to the role of play and playful learning. So it is a vitally important listen for parents, teachers, and for school leaders. Gillian, you mentioned that you were starstruck.
I absolutely was. So this episode, just speaking to Jacqueline, I am just so excited to bring this episode to all our listeners. And I was absolutely starstruck speaking to her because she's so instrumental in our new curriculum. And she just embodies the teacher I want to be. She embodies the message I want to bring. She embodies playfulness and play. And I want people to hear what she says. She's just inspirational. You know, she's such a part of our curriculum and of playfulness. And why were you starstruck?
Well, when I started training as an Ashter tutor, we heard Dr. Jacqueline Fallon speak on several occasions, and I was quite sceptical, as I've mentioned in the past, about play and is there value to it? And when I heard her speak, my mindset shifted. So I feel like if she was able to shift my mindset, maybe she will be able to support other teachers and people who are struggling in seeing the value of play in our new curriculum, to support them and seeing this is important, this matters, this is big.
It's so important that parents know what's going on in our classrooms and why play is so important in our new curriculum. I think it's a really important episode for everybody to listen to.
Enjoy.
Welcome to the Playful Lens. And in this episode, we'll be speaking to Dr. Jacqueline Fallon. Jacqueline, you're so welcome and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much, Gillian and Helena. And thank you. This is a real treat for me. And congratulations on your podcast. What a fantastic thing to be able to sit and spend a bit of time talking about play. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much. And would you like to tell our listeners who you are and why we are both feeling so starstruck to be chatting to you?
Well, I have been at this for a long time. I graduated as a primary teacher in Carysford, which is no longer there, in 1979. And I was a primary teacher for over 20 years in what are now Dash Band 1 schools, except that wasn't there then. And as part of that, I also spent 7 years working in Early Start. And those 21 or 22 years have just been the bedrock of everything else I've done since. So at that stage, I joined the Centre for Early Childhood Development and Education, and I'm one of the authors of SHIELTA, the National Quality Framework for Early Childhood Education. And from there, I moved into initial teacher education, and I lectured for 10 years on the BEd on early childhood education, as you would expect. And from there, I moved to the National Council for Curriculum Assessment, where I was for a number of years, six and a half, 7 years, I was a director of curriculum and assessment and had the privilege of working on and leading on projects on the development of the new primary curriculum framework, which I think we're maybe going to talk about a little bit.
Yes, we are.
And I retired a couple of years ago, and I am not as much of a lady of leisure as I thought I was going to be, but there you are.
It's very difficult to leave it behind, isn't it?
Oh, impossible. Impossible, because this is the wonderful thing about it. I'm as interested now as I have ever been. And it's a very exciting time to be talking about play.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and I'm looking back over very many years, and this is a good time to be talking about play.
So you mentioned there, Jacqueline, that you were part of the redevelopment of our new primary curriculum framework. Would you like to talk to us a little bit about the role of play and how play is outlined, or the place of play in our new curriculum?
Absolutely. And I think this is a little bit of a game changer. So from the point of view of just how explicitly the curriculum framework talks about play and actually talks about the fact that children have both a right and a desire to play. Now, that's a very different thing from saying, yeah, it's okay to use play. It's a methodology, which is where we were. We've now moved on. And when we talk about children having a right to play, that's a right that is with a child in every dimension of their life.
Mhm.
And school is one of those really important places where children are entitled to exercise their right to play. And one of the wonderful things, and one of the reasons it's in there, is there was a lot of consultation with children around the development of the framework. There have been several direct consultations with the children about the curriculum. And then their NCCA also invested in what your listeners might be aware of, the Children's School Life Study, which was a longitudinal study that was run by Dibna Devine and a team out in UCD. And what has come across just absolutely loud and clear in consulting with the children is how they value the types of experiences that as adults we can see are play and playful. Younger children will often use the word play, but often they talk about learning with concrete materials, active learning, being with their friends, enjoying a little bit of a struggle or a puzzle, and learning through games. And all of that is so consistent with our understanding, our professional understanding, because we're coming at this as professionals, what is understood by play. So the curriculum framework is really clear now about this. It's children's right.
Yeah.
It's their right, but then the lovely part, their desire to play. Now that's so important to us because every single teacher knows the flow you get going when the kids are into it, when they're motivated and they're liking it and they're enjoying it. And that's where the desire to play comes in. What a wonderful thing it is as a teacher to go home at the end of the day and to know that those kids had a really good time in your room and they were motivated and they got into it. Because you can have confidence that that is the optimum conditions for learning. We're all the same. Adults, we're the same. We do not like being bored. We like people to make this enjoyable so that we can really stick with it and focus. It's the same for children.
Absolutely.
I think that's a game changer in the curriculum framework, that it makes that statement that's in there. So that's probably the most important thing, because should you choose to, that sentence is repeated in all the curriculum specifications. And that's another thing that the curriculum framework and the new specifications does. It is so consistent. Because there was an awful lot about play in the 99 curriculum. And one of the things that I did as part of my job and also as part of my doctoral studies, I analysed every one of those 20-something books and pulled together everything that was in there around play. There was loads of it, but it was incredibly scattered.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no consistent messaging. That has been addressed. And there's a core, consistent message now, absolutely right across all the curriculum specifications, about children's right and desire to play.
So that's one of our key messages for teachers, that we need to start valuing children have a right and a desire to play. We need to value that as a fundamental element of our teaching and learning. And I'm wondering, would you talk to us a little bit about, because one of the things that I love about the curriculum is it actually defines, it breaks down play into 3 categories.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about playful learning, which is led by the teacher. So I would generally say that that's the activities where I'm mapping it onto a learning outcome, where I have my phonics game or a maths game. There's the child-led play. And then the third type of play that is outlined is when the teacher and the pupils are guiding the play and figuring it out together. Would you like to talk a little bit more about those?
Absolutely. And do you know where I'm going to start? I'm going to start with the last one where you talk about the teacher and the children working on something together. And the reason I want to start there is to reassure teachers that it is a professional activity to sit with a group of kids, to not have the answer,
Yeah.
and to be going the road or journeying with the children as they play. And teachers often don't want to do that for a very good reason, because they are worried that they will hijack what's happening. And they get very sensitive and they don't want to talk because they're afraid they're going to send this off in a direction that the children don't want to go in, or that they're somehow going to stop the children in their tracks. But what we do know from research is, if you look, there's a concept called sustained shared thinking, and play is a very rich context. And there's quite a well-known saying that sustained shared thinking is more likely to happen where there is sustained shared playing.
Yeah.
Teachers can be confident that if there's a scenario going on where perhaps it's a maths puzzle, okay? And the children, older children, are really trying to work something out. You don't have to go in and tell them the answer. You can sit with the children, listen to them. You can support where they're going by asking open-ended questions where the children are explaining to you why they are going to do what they're doing. And you can do that in a playful way. We don't all have to be po-faced about this. So we can ask questions, we can make jokes, we can sit, and that's what helps those children build their momentum. And it's what helps them to extend their conceptual development, where they're really trying to work this stuff out. That's a good thing to do. And it's a good thing to do it with a playful attitude yourself. No one's asking you to put on a clown nose or anything. You bring a playful attitude.
Yeah.
Now, so that's the mutually led play. And it's a very powerful thing that you can do as a teacher. Child-led. Now, this is different. This is where you are very much a follower. There's still no reason why you can't sit and listen and observe. And I'm actually going to bring in assessment at this point, because I know that one of the other things that people worry about is, can they assess? Now, I don't know if you're familiar, maybe teachers, to what degree people are familiar with the document that the department and the NCCA and what was then the PDST produced a couple of years ago, the Preparation for Teaching and Learning.
Yeah.
So in it, and this is part of the curriculum, it's referenced where different types of assessment are talked about. They're trying to open up the idea that assessment doesn't have to be an event.
Yeah.
So if children are engaging in a child-led activity where they have something open-ended that you want them to do, and they are moving ahead themselves, this is a fantastic opportunity to sit, listen, observe. And because you are so familiar with those kids, and because you are familiar with the curriculum, that's where you are able to get a sense of where the children are at in their learning. Because this is one of the things we know about assessment. We need to understand the children's learning at each stage, because building on prior learning is an important part of our work. How are you going to figure that out? The best way, one of the best ways to do it, is to sit when children are engaging in child-led play. Now, the other thing about child-led play, the curriculum is also, framework is also clear about child agency, children being able to take the lead, plan their own activity, decide how they're going to go about doing whatever it is that they want to do. And one of the wonderful photographs I think it's at the beginning of the STEM specification, is of a boy in second, maybe third class. He's standing with something, I think it's a robot that he has made from scratch. And he looks so proud of himself. What would a teacher have learned to be sitting and watching that child pursuing that goal that he has? And what do you learn? Everybody gains from that.
I think often we feel like we need permission because, we're so used to, I'm in charge. I've got my learning outcome in mind and I'm going to steer the learning to achieve that. So it's so magnificent to hear you frame it like that, Jacqueline, that as teachers, we have permission. And not only are you giving us permission, you are telling us that it is extremely valuable for us to facilitate that agency and let children take the lead and sit with them and observe and learn from that.
It is. And I think you've hit on something that's really important: permission. And that's one of the reasons, again, going back to that earlier statement, that children have the right and the desire to play. Now, the corollary of that for teachers is that this is part of our professional practice, that this is now expected, and that is your backstop. Because, of course, the other thing that really gives permission is that STEM in all the specifications, through appropriately playful and engaging learning experiences, children should be able to. And that is a form of permission. It would be a pity if it was interpreted as a requirement, or some kind of way of checking up. This is opportunity. That change provides an opportunity, and it opens up for teachers. It gives great freedom. It is a challenge, but that is your foundation. That's your starting point. And there are so many brave teachers out there I'm at this a long time, and back when we didn't have this curriculum framework that is so clear about the place of play, and so many brave teachers, it took bravery to put one foot in front of the other and say, I believe and I know that this is the right thing for the children in my class, and who took that step and gradually developed their expertise. And I've known so many teachers like that over the last 30 years, and I always, just had such admiration for them. And I feel that the framework is as much theirs and is a real vindication of all the work that has happened in our system, that we were able to get to the point where we can now say to every teacher, the children in your class have a right and a desire to play. And this is a quote from the framework as well. Play is of value in and of itself. It brings powerful benefits to children. We are now able to say, and there are so many teachers out there who should feel really vindicated. And there are a lot of other teachers who should be able to feel, this is something I think I can get behind, because I have a sense as a professional, and I know my kids, that this is going to work for them. And this is going to lead to even greater effectiveness and well-being. I'm going to say that. I mean, one of the competences in the primary framework, these are new as well, new competencies. One of them is being well. Now, I can tell you, in 40 years of this, I never saw a kid playing that wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Siobhan Prendeville would say when children play, they experience
Yeah.
well-being.
Mm,
And I
yes.
think as well, it's also, for our well-being too. I mean, I know when I'm doing things like that in my classroom, and I think when I kind of found that, yeah, that permission and that release to this is the way my classroom works. It's our well-being too. It's such a wonderful way to experience teaching and learning, and for our well-being too. I think it's really important as well. It really works. And of course, then the relationships and the connections in the classroom just absolutely are so enhanced, so it absolutely feeds into well-being. They just go hand in hand, don't they?
Well, that resonates. That really resonates with me, that idea of the teacher's well-being, because I, and this is going way back into the 90s, and our classes were huge, by comparison to even now. And I have been working in infants, and then with just this, and this is back in the days of readers and getting through 4 readers and we just taught in blocks,
Hmm.
there were all kinds of things going on, and I just knew, I'm not saying I had any great expertise, I didn't, but I knew my kids, and I knew that this was not, this just wasn't. And then I
Yeah.
had the opportunity to move into early start, and I have to tell you, the relief and the sense that as I began to develop, it was back in 1995, the what it did for my sense of I was doing the right thing, because I had an increasing discomfort that I was doing my best, but I wasn't doing the right thing. So as a teacher, I certainly, way back then, really felt what you're describing, Gillian, that sense of your own well-being, because it certainly put my mind at rest when I was working in that way with the children.
Yeah.
Um, and that
It is, yeah.
it's kind of transformational.
It is, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
found that myself, in my journey, I kind of, as we said, got that permission, shall we say. I was 2 years into my teaching journey. And then a number of years later, when I moved to sixth class, and I've spoken about this already, when I moved to sixth class, it's that release that you realize this is how it is. This is how my classroom is. And I suppose leading on from that, Jacqueline, what would you say? Like, we spoke about this before we start recording, that kind of connotation around the word play and the language that's used, that sometimes people think that, okay, well, that's fine in the junior classes. Yeah, you go ahead and you do that. But you can't play with your sixth class. You can't play with third class. They should be getting the real work done, and they need to be getting ready for secondary school. And I know the NCCA have said that, play is in every classroom for every child every day. So what would you say to reassure teachers and to encourage teachers to bring that play and that playfulness and the child-led play into the middle and senior classes? That's where my gra is, and I always push that point.
It is a challenge,
Yeah.
and I don't want to minimize it
Yeah.
for anybody. And I think it is one of those areas, Gillian, where your, your prior work and your experience with play in younger or junior classes, I think that is a great benefit
Yes. Yeah.
for then going to work in, because you yourself will have developed expertise literally on the ground, and you have developed a knowledge and an awareness of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's be fair to everyone. There's a famous, wonderful woman, Professor Janet Moyles, who did a lot of her work in the 90s and was certainly very influential here as well. Now, she wrote that play in educational settings should have learning consequences. And so we need to be, we need to be clear, that's our baseline.
Yeah.
Um, but it is the case now that play and playfulness, and I'm actually going to put you on the spot now and possibly embarrass you slightly, Gillian, because one of the resources I would really recommend to teachers who are teaching in the senior classes is to have a read of the document that you were involved with Emer Ring and Leisha O'Sullivan on Play for Teaching and Learning, which is on the NCCA website. And I would recommend that teachers in senior classes have a read of that. And just to tell everybody, it's a short document. It's fantastic.
Yes.
It's quite short, snappy, to the point. And what that document does that I think is so very helpful is it cracks open playful.
Yes.
And it cracks it open, I think, into characteristics of activities that many teachers in third, fourth, fifth, and sixth can look at and say, well, actually, there's some stuff that I do that is joyful or iterative, and we come back to it. So I think that going back to that point, it gives you a starting point. Because one of the things that's daunting if you're teaching fifth class and you look at this and say, what does this, how am I to do this? Have a read of that short document, because I think what teachers in the senior classes will find is a starting point. Now, the place where it's likely, just doubling back a little bit, Helena, to what you were asking about, or what we were talking about earlier, how play can happen. So the thing that's probably most challenging, I'm just going to say, I think teachers in senior classes are really going to recognize the bit where perhaps it's maths through games.
Yes, yeah.
Or, so, which is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And especially where children can work together in a group, learning their maths, figuring things out, because that really embeds that learning. And I think the maths curriculum does a very good job of promoting that kind of learning and moving us away from, the more, I'm going to show you how to do this, and then you spend the next 6 months doing it exactly the same way. So we're moving on. That I think teachers will. The child-led play is, I think, what is going to cause a little bit of not disquiet, but puzzlement. Let's call it puzzlement. It is kind of, but I think, and I have it open beside me here because I thought this is something I really want to talk about. The framework or the curriculum is very keen on integration now and sort of pulling things together into an integrated space, where you might be working on your wellbeing curriculum during your arts curriculum, which is one of the reasons, if you look at the time allocations, it's suggested because, and I do have to go into the whole time thing. Now, that is one of the wonderful places, I think, around the arts curriculum and well-being and literacy, where I would be looking and really suggesting strongly to senior class teachers to pull in open-ended resources. There's a wonderful concept in Professor Pat Broadhead's work, which was called the Whatever You Want It to Be place, where the children are given open-ended materials, which might be just stuff that has been collected in the green bin. It could be your big selection of Lego. It could be wooden blocks, or I'm aware of a school where they borrow stuff from the junior classes in order to provide an open-ended learning experience where the children discuss and decide as part of their art where they are going to create something. And here we are now into creativity, because an open-ended learning experience, whether you're 9 or 19 or 90, that is one of the most creative spaces you will ever occupy. And senior class children are as open to that, as entitled to that, and they make every bit as much use out of it as children in junior and senior infants, where it seems to be, where it is kind of more accepted. They're only 5, that's what they do, No,
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that, Jacqueline. And I have seen that myself, that they just love it, and
Yeah.
It just brings in those 5 characteristics of play. It is so joyful for them. And I would always say that to any middle senior teacher, go and chat to your junior infant colleagues and borrow the stuff and bring them up. And I have done that so many times. And my 6th class would go, Play-Doh, really?
Yeah.
And 5 minutes later, they're having the best time with the Play-Doh, and it's open-ended. And as you say, do what you want with it. And they do love that. And we have to bring that out, and we have to give them that time.
But what would you ladies say to me now if I said to you, but we've so much to do in 6th class. They're going to secondary school next year. The curriculum is already overloaded. Like, I'm already overwhelmed with my workload, and parents have expectations. What would you say to a teacher who voices that?
I would, well, the first thing I would want to do for any of those is acknowledge their sense of stress, because as teachers, we are not sole traders. We are all, unless you're teaching in a one teacher school, you are part of a team, and your principal is responsible for everything that's happening in the school. We need to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge that stress that teachers feel. And one of the reasons they feel that is their sense of accountability. Accountability to parents, to their colleagues, to the principal, then accountability for the children's learning and accountability to the children, because they want to make sure that the children are as best placed as they can be. And this is going to take some time, but I do think that the framework shifts that a little bit now. And one of the things that shifts it a lot is to go back to the document I mentioned earlier about preparation for teaching and learning. Because one of the qualities of play and playful learning is it can, because it is more open-ended. I mean, one of the great things about it, of course, is because it is open-ended, it really supports children's development of divergent thinking. And the preparation for teaching and learning is much more amenable to that concept of divergent thinking. And there are multiple ways. And the competences in the curriculum as well allow us a lens onto what the children are actually doing. So if you look at the idea of preparation, where you have those 3: invisible preparation, visible preparation, recorded preparation. Those three aspects of preparation as a teacher really fit very well with what can happen in a playful learning circumstance, because it can go off in a different direction. We recognize that from the one that the teacher thought might happen. And this concept of, for example, invisible preparation, because you know your curriculum, you have your plan for the term, for the year, there's the school plan, and you're pretty familiar with all of that. One of the demands on us now as a professional is to be able to spot those, what we used to call in early childhood, the teachable moment, where you see a dynamic that has arisen. Maybe it's not what was in your head half an hour ago, but here it is. And this is a point at which you can pick up that teaching point, step in and engage on that with the children. But this is one of those things that is going to require a shift over time around this idea of preparing them for secondary school. But the curriculum itself, I mean, the maths curriculum is taking a different approach to this. And over time, its aim is to move children away from a very superficial grasp of procedure to move into a different space of a much, much deeper understanding. And that is only going to come through the kind of activities that we're talking about here, which are open-ended, where children struggle a bit and work things out. And in talking to teachers of senior class, especially 5th and 6th class, one of the very useful concepts in the idea, all these ideas around play, is Pappert's hard fun. Seymour Papert was he was a lecturer in MIT. Now his thing, a lot of it was around early stages of coding, Lego, robotics. And he noted from all of his work, and he worked a lot with students and children who in what we would call disadvantaged areas, who were alienated from schools. And one of the things that he identified is the satisfaction, the joy, the deeply felt engagement and motivation about something that was hard and it was fun.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons it was fun is because it was really hard. And children, people, they liked working together on problems. They got profound satisfaction from it, and it motivated the students deeply. And I think that will resonate a lot with teachers in senior classes.
So the value that you're talking about there and all it brings from, the competencies for be creative, being well, the hard, fun, the struggle and the frustration tolerance, which builds resilience when we're engaging in activities like that. That to me is of equal importance as any other subject that we're going to teach those children. And I would not say to you as a 6th class teacher, I don't have time for literacy, or I don't have time for numeracy, or we don't have time for PE, because we value them so much. So from listening to you, Jacqueline, is it fair to place the same amount of value on our playful learning and on our child-led play?
Well, I think, yes, I think it is. And it's not just that I think it is. The curriculum says play, we go back to that fundamental point. Children have a right and a desire. We can do this through 3 approaches, and we've outlined them here. The only one that's actually going to cause anybody issues around time is child-led play. The curriculum isn't a barrier to that because the timeframes are suggested. No teacher would ever say, I think pair work would be a really good pedagogical strategy to use for my story writing workshop. Now, no one is ever going to say, where am I going to get the time for pair work, for that pedagogical strategy? Well, in schools, play is a pedagogical strategy, and it does require time. I mean, there is that, we know this, that where play is happening, children need time to build momentum. But children need time to build momentum into their learning. Nobody would imagine that you were going to sit down, for example, and do a writing workshop and give it 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Is anybody saying, where am I going to get time to do a writing workshop for an hour and 15 minutes so that we can really get our teeth into it? Nobody's asking that question. Well, it makes no more sense than to say, where will I get the time to give an hour or an hour and a half to an open-ended play session where the children, they make a plan, they look at their resources, they set out to decide what to do, and they get to build their momentum. I get to sit, to listen, to observe, and to learn about their language, their conceptual development, their capacity to engage, cooperate, negotiate. How are they doing in terms of the competence of being well? Are they getting on with their pals? Can they have a bit of a disagreement and get over it? Are they able to execute the plan? And if it doesn't work, how do they react? Now, why would you, there's no more need to ask, where am I going to get the time for that pedagogical strategy, as opposed to asking it about any other
Yeah.
pedagogical strategy.
And I want to just zoom in on something you said there, Jacqueline, because that's really important. We would not expect them 10, 15 minutes, that's your numeracy done for today, or that's your writing workshop. We never.
Never.
So
No.
you have given us real clarity on that. If we're going to facilitate that child-led play, it needs to be a significant block of time. So an hour or an hour and a half to ensure that it's meaningful and that the children have time to engage deeply with it, and we have time to sit with them and observe and look and listen and learn about that vast array of competencies that you mentioned there.
This is a slightly delicate one, in terms of nailing it down in, about how long you should be. The key word, what I'd like everyone to take away, is momentum.
Yeah.
What is required for the children to build momentum? And that is a question you would ask about any learning experience that you set up and any pedagogical strategy that you use. What's needed to build momentum? Whether it's a project or anything, or painting even, it doesn't matter. What do the children require in using this pedagogical strategy to build their momentum? And the reason, Helena, I just get a little bit nervous about nailing time onto something is that back in the day, this whole thing of the Ashtar hour really became a millstone round everybody's neck, which of course it was never meant to be, and it backfired, I think. Well, not everywhere, but it did reach a point where was not the experience you would want it to be, and it ended up being something completely different. But the hour just made the whole thing become way too rigid.
Okay.
So it isn't that you must have an hour. It is what's needed to build momentum and make this an effective pedagogical strategy. So if you're doing a project work, again, I would say, would you have them doing a project for 15 minutes? No. If we're going to get into this in a meaningful way, well, if I'm using this open-ended with concrete materials, very active engagement, the children are in groups, they're making choices about their materials. How long, what can I give? How is this going to work? How much do these children need to build momentum into their play?
Yeah. And
This
that
is one of the
change, couldn't it? Like from week to week, from term to term, from class to class. So
and
what
from
we need
child to
to
child,
find.
inclusion is a huge thing around time as well, because if we're interested in their social development, their capacity to engage with their peers, they need a bit of time and space
Yeah.
Yeah, they
and a
really
bit of
do.
support.
And can I just ask you, because one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, so we're providing these open-ended resources. If there is a child that is continually returning to the same resource again and again and again, would you talk a little bit about that? What's your perspective on that?
Being iterative is an important part. It's an important opportunity in play. If you listen to any of the engineering entrepreneurs, I won't say names, but think of a famous vacuum cleaner, and so inventors. And I'll tell you a great. I know, Gillian, you certainly love your cup of coffee. I love my cup of coffee, and I use an AeroPress. My fabulous. I'd be lost without it. And I watched a video of the inventor of the AeroPress, and he talked about how many versions of it, when he was developing this from the initial idea, he kept going back into the workshop and he tweaked it and he moved it on. And then he eventually got to the point where he said, this is perfect. And it is perfect. I love it.
That's really reassuring.
It is really reassuring.
Yes. And when a child is working on something and they want to come back to it and they want to come back to it, they need to explain. This is where the listening,
Yes, yes.
why are they coming back to it? There's a big difference between a child who said, well, I was thinking about it last night, and I think if I do that, it's going to be better. That's what you want to hear, because that's a plan, that's determination, that's the capacity to see it through. That's it. Now, if you have a child who keeps returning to the same space because, for example, they don't have the social capital to go somewhere else
Uh-huh.
and get themselves into the space, then you have a different issue.
Hmm.
But you have learned something about what that child needs. And honestly, I can tell you, hand on heart, one of the best ways of supporting children in their social skills is in the context of an open-ended, child-directed activity with concrete materials, because there's an air of openness and relaxation.
Uh-huh.
Because I think we all know that, for example, where where we have group work, where a group, for example, are given something in maths to do, where, some children are just not going to be all that welcoming to a child who really struggles. If there is an end in sight, something that has to be completed, a task, and put your hand up when the group has finished the task, that's not a great space for supporting children who need support to develop their social skills. There is very, very different vibe altogether when you have materials out there and children are able to move, go to another group, borrow something from that table, bring it back to your own, and to and from. So wonderful.
And I think, what I would have noticed in my classroom, from junior infants right up to 6, is sometimes we forget that children are innately kind.
Yes,
Mm.
yeah.
And when we provide that space, you see that magic happen.
Yeah.
You'll see the child that's an empath, and they'll notice, oh, you're on your own, and they'll engage. Like, it's magic,
It
really,
is, yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's socially, it is a place where children are able to demonstrate aptitudes and skills and characteristics that in maybe a more formal circumstance or context doesn't shine. Something I wouldn't like to go away now without having mentioned was the consultation with children. Just to say, one of the fantastic things about the new framework is the amount of consultation with children that happened. It has never. I don't think it's particularly well known, in terms of being published or whatever. There's a vast amount of consultation with children, and so much of the responses and the feedback around play and playfulness and being engaging, and so much of that comes through. And Professor Aisling Levy in Mary I and a fantastic team of researchers did a consultation with children on learning maths in school, how they liked to learn maths. And it was just it was just universal. And I actually wrote this down because I thought, I really can't go away now without citing this one, where the children universally acknowledged favoring more interactive learning opportunities, including the use of real world context, hands-on experiences, and playful mathematical experiences such as maths games. There were other things that they liked, and they even, they didn't like too much by way of maths workbooks, but now and again they thought they were okay. But their biggest problem with the workbooks, for example, was boredom. Whereas they found maths games and so forth. That's what they wanted more of. And this is the hard fun. They liked challenge, but they liked the challenge where it was motivating and where it was interesting. That's another just fantastic report that happened. But if we're serious, we're all there for the kids, teachers everywhere. It goes back to one of the reasons that they get nervous about play is they're afraid they won't be doing the best thing for the children, because that's what we all want. We want the best thing for the children. Well, the children are telling us loud and clear. UCD did the reports. Mary I did a consultation with children. Marino did consultations with children and other things. And it didn't matter who was doing the research. Play, the children's desire to play, to be with their friends, and to be doing hands-on, engaging activities everywhere. So if we're serious about doing the best we can for the kids, about making sure we get the being well, being creative, one of the best things we can do for them is to provide them with these 3 kinds of contexts for playful learning, for being playful ourselves as adults with them. And so many teachers are. I mean, teachers are so witty and funny and entertaining. And it goes back, Gillian, to what you were talking about, but the transformation for yourself, for your experience of teaching, to be able to engage like that.
Yep.
I think the whole thing is pretty liberating.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Everybody.
And you know what, Jacqueline? I feel like we need that now more than ever. And what I often hear from teachers now is that they're seeing more dysregulation in their classrooms, and which will manifest as behaviours.
Yeah.
And I know that when I facilitated play in my classroom, that stopped.
Yeah.
That went away.
Yeah.
That the engagement was there. So children are communicating that with us loud and clear in our classrooms. Jacqueline, sincere thanks for bringing such clarity to the place of play in our new curriculum. And I think this is a really important lesson for teachers, but for parents as well, to understand how our role as teachers is beginning to evolve, and our curriculum for the children and the place of play in that is evolving and changing. A final word, we'll give it to you, Jacqueline. Imagine if you have the ears of all the school leaders, teachers, parents in the country. What would you like them to know?
That play is a good thing for your kids' learning. They're in school. That's a very particular context. Learning through play is a very good way for kids to learn.
Jacqueline Fallon, who has a core role in developing our new curriculum framework, says play is a good way for your children to learn. So thank you so much,
Thank you
Jacqueline.
so much,
It's been a
Jacqueline. Such an
privilege.
insightful conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, a pleasure, ladies. A pleasure. Thank you so much.
So we hope that you really enjoyed that episode. We'd like to thank Dr. Jacqueline Fallon for taking time out of her busy schedule to talk with us. We hope that this conversation has brought clarity to the place of play in our new curriculum framework, and it has brought attention to our evolving role as more playful professionals in our classrooms. We hope that this is a resource to support you as a teacher in your own play journey.
And all of the documents that Jacqueline mentioned throughout our conversation in this episode will all be linked in the show notes. So if at any time you want to dip in and out of them and have a read, they will be there for you. We hope you enjoyed this episode, as Helena said, and if you would like to hear more, remember to like and subscribe for notifications. And if you liked it, share it with your colleagues and your friends.